Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
And I'm ready whenever you are.
All right. All right, you ready now so I can take your order?
Oh, I am so ready. Don't you hate it when people come in and they don't know what they want? I always know what I want. All right, so firstly, I would like 2 eggs. Now, I want them over easy, and the whites need to be completely done. You know what I mean. I don't like them when they're all jiggly, but don't overcook them because that yellow should still have that beautiful yellow sheen and not look all dull. And when you poke it, just a touch, it should be a little bit runny, but still retain that nice round shape. And here's a trick for you. If you'll just pop right on back into the kitchen, just a skosh, just a smidge of bacon grease right there in the pan before you pop my eggs on, they'll crisp up really nicely. That one's for you. Okay, now speaking of bacon, I want 2 slices. Now, they have to be well done. Crispy, but not burned. I don't want to spend my whole breakfast picking the black bits off the edges. And definitely not floppy. Everyone hates floppy bacon. Well, you know what I mean. So, now, the last thing is, I have heard a lot in the media. I like to educate myself. So I've heard a lot about gluten, and I just want to stay way away from it. I don't know much about it, but I don't want to have anything to do with it. So what are my choices as far as gluten-free breads and pastries?
I'm just going to have to get back with you on that one. Okay, here we got, let's see, we got some cheese omelet with a side of ham.
Oh, I think that's yours, isn't it, CJ?
Yeah, it is, but I ordered a chocolate chip muffin with this.
Oh, shoot, we're out of chocolate chip. How would you like a blueberry muffin instead?
That's fine. It's not what I ordered, but I'll take a blueberry.
Okay, so, ma'am, are you the scrambled eggs and ham?
No, that's my order, but I ordered hash browns, not grits. But I'll eat it.
Oh my gosh, I just don't know what happened here, why I got so mixed up. Must have been that fellow over there that disrupted me and distracted me.
I think that is mine over there.
Right, all right.
It looks like it. Oh,
Here you go.
I'm sure it'll be good. You guys have been so busy this
Huh.
morning.
Well, thank you for your understanding. Thank you. Thank you for understanding. You know, I'm just going to have to get back with you.
Well, I guess there's no way I'm going to get what I wanted.
We wonder why everybody goes to Peach Valley on Sundays and not Noel's Diner. Once again, high quality service over there. But you know what it's like when you've been to a restaurant and you don't get what you want. You don't get what you order. I was with somebody the other day who literally did, hey, you didn't do this right here. Let me tell you how to do it and send it back. I'm like, I ain't gonna eat when they bring that out at that point, right? You go to that restaurant, you order, and you tell them what. And I bet all of us in the room can talk about Christmases in the past that we didn't get what we wanted, that didn't turn out like we expected. A Christmas event that wasn't what we had hoped for. Maybe it was your flight got delayed and you made the mistake of flying through Atlanta during the holiday season, and you spent some extra hours there and it delayed all that, or maybe your packages didn't make it, or maybe you've had, we've all had a Christmas dinner meal that got cooked a little longer than it should have. Or worse, when you cut into the turkey and realize, no, a couple more hours would have been helpful for that. We've had those moments where Christmases haven't turned out like we had hoped for. Or perhaps we probably can all relate to Ralphie from A Christmas Story. There's something you desperately wanted for Christmas. You had a wish list. I really want to get this for Christmas. And you didn't. Right, you remember the Christmas morning. I mean, one of the years Christmas, my sister and I still talk about it. From our uncle gave her a pair of pantyhose, used pantyhose. And I was in the 8th grade, and I got a copy of The Grapes of Wrath, a already highlighted edition for me. That was a good Christmas, right? You can look back and you can kind of laugh at some of the Christmases that haven't turned out the way that you have expected. You can look back. Maybe years later, we still give my uncle a hard time about the pantyhose and the grapes of wrath. You can laugh at it years later. You can overlook and move past a bad turkey bad Christmas dinner turkey. You can get over not being invited to the cool Christmas party and all of that. You can move past all those kind of things. But what do you do when life's not what you had hoped for? What do you do when life isn't going the way you'd wanted? What do you do when life isn't what you expected, what you had hoped for? As you begin to move into the Christmas, it's not. It's what we talked about last week a little bit about, when life's not going and you call out to God, how long, oh Lord, must I go through this? And you begin to wrestle and you begin to struggle. What do you do when life's not what you hoped for? As I was working on this sermon this week, one of the other things I get to do is I work with a lot of younger pastors, helping them learn some of the preaching skills. Evidently, they think I can help them with that. And so I was meeting with a guy, and I was digging through some of my notes, trying to find something to share with him. And out fell a note that had been given to me years ago. It's actually one that I keep in my head. It's always kind of playing in the back of my head while I'm preaching. This note actually comes from a friend of mine, Christine Parton Burkett. She is the lecturing fellow of speech at Duke University. She's a speech pathologist, and so she's worked with me a lot over the years, trying to help with lots of things. But Christine and I started at Duke together. Our offices were right next to each other when I was there. She, become good friends over the years and have done lots of stuff together. And we were at some event talking about preaching, and her lecture was on the congregation. Who are you preaching to? And she says, every time you get ready to preach, remember this. And she read this letter, and I asked her for a copy of the letter, and I've gotten to the age I got to wear these to read the letter. But this is what she says. Dear preacher, I am a member of your audience, and I sit before you now in silent desperation. I am a mother of a good Christian teenage girl who just told me that she's pregnant. I am a husband whose marriage is falling apart, and no matter what I do, I can't seem to stop it. I am a child who has tried so hard to win the affection of my dad, but all I hear from him is how many times I keep screwing up. I am a senior citizen who sees that my life is coming to a close, and I am worried and scared, not knowing if my life has made a difference or if my future is secure. I am a father of 3 kids, and the doctor just told me my wife can't possibly live more than a couple of months. I am a widow who sits alone in my home, so lonely yet no one seems to care. I am by all accounts a successful man who has gotten everything he has wanted in life, but it hasn't been enough. I am blue and depressed, and I don't even know why, but I can't go on living like this any longer. I am a parent who raised my kid in the church, but now my child is so far away from the Lord, we can't even discuss it anymore. I'm single, and I've just invested all I had in a relationship, and the person walked away without ever looking back. I am a wife whose husband rarely speaks to me, and I can't remember the last time he held me. I feel so lonely and abandoned even in my own home. Oh, you can't see my desperation by looking at me. I've learned to hide my feelings so deeply that sometimes I even fool myself. The people who sit on either side of me would be surprised to know that I walk the floor each night and cry. I can imagine the shocked surprise of those sitting with me in the pew if I told them I had thought about considering ending it all. Or maybe they wouldn't be shocked at all. Maybe they have too. So, preacher, when I sit before you on a Sunday morning, I don't want to hear your thoughts on transactional analysis or theological exhortations. I don't want to hear the latest Reader's Digest joke, and I don't want you to share a few thoughts that you put together the night before. I don't want to hear about the latest book on pastoral counseling, and I don't want to be begged for money for a new church building for the world's hungry. Preacher, I hurt. I feel empty and useless with nowhere to go. My question to you is the same that the king asked God's prophet Jeremiah. Is there any word from the Lord? I bet we could add to that, couldn't we? All of us in this room have a story we could probably add to that. Dear preacher, I sit before you on a Sunday morning in silent desperation, and I am. And you could fill it in, couldn't you? The messy side of Christmas, when life isn't what you'd expected. So what do you do? What do you do when you've called out to God? You say, how long, O Lord? And you hold on. Sometimes that's all you can do. And then that next step, how do you keep taking that next step? And so what I want to look at today, I want to look at a story in the Bible today of somebody who was in the crowd and nobody knew. She probably hid behind the smile. She was silent. Nobody knew her issue. Well, it's not a story we normally read at Christmas time. It's the story found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 8. Let me read the story to us. Now, when Jesus returned, it means he'd been away. He'd actually been outside of Israel. He'd been in a non-Jewish area, and he had come back to the Jewish area. A crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader. Okay, so synagogue leader, this is a man of faith. This is a pastor, a rabbi of the day. Jairus came to him and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. Jesus is on his way. The crowds crushed him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. Some translation read had an issue of bleeding for 12 years, and no one could heal her. As you look through some of the commentaries on this, and some other Bible translations would say this here, no one could heal her. Some scriptures say she had been to all the doctors and nothing had happened. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. Who touched me? Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter's like, Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. But Jesus said, No, someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me. Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, and fell at his feet, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told him why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, and I want y'all to remember this part, we'll come back to it. Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. While Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead, he said. Don't bother the teacher anymore. Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe. A better way, we translate that believe. Another way to word that would be, don't be afraid, keep trusting, is a phrase that could go in there. And she will be healed. When he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. Stop wailing, Jesus said. She's not dead, but asleep. They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and said, my child, get up. Her spirit returned, and she stood up at once. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Why did he tell her to give her something to eat? She was hungry. I know y'all are looking for a deep answer there, right? Y'all are all into it, and sometimes realize, just hungry. Her parents were astonished, but Jesus told them not to tell anyone what had happened. So one of my questions I immediately have with the scripture is, if Jesus told them not to tell anybody what happened, how do we know? People told, right? It's really not, it's not one story. There are two stories kind of crammed together here. There's a story of Jairus and there's a story of the woman, and they kind of merge into one story, but they're both stories of desperation. They're both stories of life not going how they wanted. They're both stories of things not what we had hoped for, not what we had expected. There's Jairus. His only daughter of 12 is dying, and he throws himself at the feet of Jesus. That's an image of desperation for you. There's, God, help. And there's this sense of, even today we get this. A 12-year-old dying, something ain't right about that. And I actually did a funeral this week. She's about 90. Even a 90-year-old dying, there's part of us go like that. But when a 12-year-old, when a kid, there's just something about us that, no. This is, and Jairus, he's the synagogue leader. He's a man of faith. He's done everything right. He's lived everything. And there's this sense of urgency with this. This isn't a long-term, how long, oh Lord, issue. But as you read this story, there's a sense of she was fine, and now she's sick. What do we do? God, help. And Jesus is like, all right, let's go. You imagine the wave of relief that comes over Jairus to pray and have Jesus go, all right, let's go. And they begin to make their way. He's like, I'm not going to have to wait. And they begin to make their way. As they're making their way through the crowd, there's this crowd that's gathered around Jesus as always. And people were touching him. People were pulling on him. But there was this woman. I mean, isn't it sad we don't know her name? We don't know who she is. We know nothing about her. She was silent in the crowd. And she appears for a moment. She gets healed and she disappears again. What she does is, this woman, she's had an issue of blood for 12 years. For 12 years, she's been bleeding and can't do it. In the scriptures, she's done everything she knows what to do. She spent all of her life savings, all the money she had. She's gone to every doctor. She's tried every medical procedure, some of them not even FDA approved. She's done. And she's done everything she can to get healed. And she's even tried some of them wacky things that other, people do. Eat this, do this. Hey, all of it. To no avail. This has been Jairus' daughter had been alive for 12 years, 12 vibrant years and all that. And immediately she's sick and Jairus is stressing out. This woman for 12 years. For 12 years she's been calling out, how long, O Lord, must I deal with this? How long do I have to carry? She is weary and at her wit's end. Desperate. And she grabs a hold of Jesus. Now, I know the scripture says she touched him. I don't think she went. I think she grabbed. Because there was a mystique about the Messiah. There was a teaching about the Messiah. It's not biblical. It's just kind of the traditions and the legends that build around the Messiah. They build around the Messiah saying this, that the Messiah was so holy, the Messiah was so spiritual, the Messiah was such a man of God that if the Messiah passed by you, if you could just grab the hem of his garment, you would be healed. And so when Jesus passes by this woman, you realize she's broke all the rules, right? Because having an issue of blood meant she couldn't be in contact with anybody. Because she was bleeding, and that was a cultural taboo at that point. And so she was supposed to say, I'm unclean, stay away. If she sat down in a chair, she's supposed to say, you can't sit here, I'm unclean. But she's not saying that. She sneaks into the crowd to risk everything. And when Jesus passes by, man, she grabs a hold. And I want to say that's an act of faith. Part of me feels like it's just a desperation move. Except for Jesus. There's something different about the way the woman grabbed him, because he stops and goes, hey, who touched me? And I love Peter's like, dude, there are like 1,000 people. Everybody's touched you. Right? He's like, no, this one, there's something different about this one. And the woman, this is the part of the story we just overlook, but think about it. She has to admit in front of all of y'all. What if right now we said, hey, you need to stand up and tell me your issue? And she says, I've been bleeding for 12 years. I've done everything. I've tried everything. I just want to be healed. Verse 48, daughter, your faith had... There was something about her when she grabbed a hold. She just knew, all I got to do is grab a hold of Jesus and I will be okay. I'm just going to grab a hold of Jesus and it will work. This will be okay. And that's confident trust. That's a belief. That's an acting out moment. That's faith. Your faith. It wasn't her desperation. It wasn't her tug. It wasn't the magic of the skirt he was wearing or whatever was on that she grabbed the hem of the garment. Her faith made her well. Actually, that word where we say that her faith healed her, it also means well. It also means saved. Your faith has healed you. Your faith has made you well. Your faith has saved you. Which is great for the woman. But can you feel the tension in Jairus building up at this point? Can you imagine being Jairus, your only daughter, 12 years old, dying, and Jesus, I've prayed to you, and you're going to do something, and we got to go. Time is of the essence. I cannot wait. And they come and say to him, hey, Jairus, your daughter's dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore. Come on home. Let's grieve. You ever feel like God's not in quite a bigger rush as you are? I mean, you know your situation. God, come on. And you're like, why are you worried about that? Isn't this? And then Jesus says this to him, because Jesus evidently overhears. He's talking to the woman, but he hears. And he says this, verse 50, don't be afraid. Keep trusting. Now, the cool part of the story is Jesus goes back to Jairus' house and heals her, and she lives. There's part of me that sometimes wishes the Bible would just end there. Don't be afraid. Keep trusting. See, we always want everything wrapped up in a nice, neat little package and wonderful life kind of stuff. But the power of this story is verse 50. Don't be afraid. Keep trusting. That's easy to say, man. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to keep walking with Jesus, to keep believing in Jesus, to keep doing what Jesus calls us to do when the disaster seems to be looming. Right? You know why Jesus has don't be afraid? Why he has to say that? Because when things aren't going the way we hope, when things don't go the way we expect, when life isn't turning out how we wanted it to, fear creeps in. And it begins to push out doubt. It begins to push out hope and faith and love, and begins to put in doubt. And don't be afraid. Keep trusting. Just grab a hold. Don't let go. Keep walking. Can you imagine what it felt like to be Jairus, for Jesus to say, hey, don't be afraid. Keep believing. And Jesus just started walking. There's part of me, I really want to see the story. I really want to see how it plays out, because there's part of me like Jesus going, no, come on, dude. I told you, come on, let's go. Because I don't know if you came to me and said, hey, your son is dead. How do you take that next step? Sometimes all you can do is just grab a hold. Don't let go. Don't be afraid. Keep trusting. And that's the message of Christmas. That's the message of Christmas, whether it's a moment of immediate desperation and fear, or it's a lifelong, how long, O Lord? The message of Christmas is God is here. That gives me hope. We're not alone. It's this. I love these Christ candles that we light. You remember when we light them on Christmas Eve? And they're big and they're beautiful, and it's like, ah. And then the year wears on. And we are worn down and falling apart. And yet the light still shines. Keep trusting. Don't be afraid. It's amazing how one little candle in the dark can bring such hope. You know that when the power goes out, right? First thing you do, you light that candle. And even though sheer chaos is blowing around you, you remember that back, we called her Irma. Sheer chaos is blowing around you. One little candle. Sometimes all you can do is grab a hold. Sometimes on the journey, Jesus heals you. And sometimes on the journey, all he does is walk with you and stay with you in your pain. And that brings hope. Never goes as we expect. Dear preacher, I am a member of your audience, and I sit before you in silent desperation. I am What's the line you fill in? What is it that you would write down right now if you were writing this letter to me? Dear preacher, I am a member of your audience and I sit before you in silent desperation. I am. You can't tell it by looking at me. I'll smile in the lobby and I'll have my donut. But inside, dear preacher, I sit in silent desperation. My question to you is the same that the king asked the prophet Jeremiah. Is there any word from the Lord? Yes. Grab a hold. Don't let go. Keep trusting. Don't be afraid. I am here. Let's pray. Oh God, that's easier said than done. Because some of us in this room have been holding on. How long, oh Lord? And others of us woke up this morning and, oh my goodness, we're afraid and we are weary and life is not what we had hoped for. You know our issue, our fear and our worry. And as you pass by us today, or as we come forward today, may we grab a hold and not let go. And may we hear your words echo in our head and in our hearts over and over. Do not be afraid. Keep trusting. And we'd ask for you to fix it and heal it. And if you can't or won't do that, then walk with us on the journey so we know we're not alone. Amen. So in this meal and in this mystery, we experience Christ's presence with us. Because on the night in which he gave himself up for us, he took bread and he gave thanks and he broke it. And he gave it to his disciples. He said, take and eat. This is my body which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. When the supper was over, he took a cup, gave thanks unto God, and after giving thanks, gave it to his disciples and said, drink from this, all of you. This is my blood, the blood of the new covenant, poured out for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins. As you come forward today, come forward knowing that God is here and Christ is present. As you come forward and you extend your hands out, may you be like that woman and just grab a hold. Don't let go. Or maybe you need to be like Jairus, who fell on his face before Jesus, at Jesus' feet. Maybe you just come and kneel at the altar and say, oh God, help. And may you hear the words, don't be afraid. Keep trusting. I am here. God, pour out your Holy Spirit on us gathered here on these gifts of the bread and the cup, and make them be for us the body and blood of Christ. That as we feast on them, we might experience your love and your grace. And may we grab a hold and not let